Hampi Art Lab is an artist residency. It's a kind of very unusual, a linear kind of twisting building, which is packed with a few artistic programs such as artist residences. There is, I guess, there is a gallery, a cafe. The building is very active. The way it meanders through the landscape, you can climb it. I wonder, what can you say about this building and also how you received this commission?
So the commission came through GSW, who are the patrons of the Hampi Art Labs. We were already doing some work with them, and they had seen in our portfolio the library that we had done, the sP+a library, which was a standing vaulted structure working with the idea of the compression walls, right? And so they really liked this idea that we were looking at, and we engaged with fairly in projects, some built, some unbuilt, about architectural landscape, and where, there is no need to kind of divide the, maybe architecture can also be landscape. So we received the commission through that link. But when we started working on it, we actually spent a lot of time grappling with the context of the site itself. It is, of course, barren and has no features, no trees, nothing. But it lies very close to an incredibly beautiful set of medieval Indian ruins built out of stone within this beautiful landscape of Tungabhadra River. And when we looked at the ruins, we were wondering, our first impression was whether we should start looking at the architecture of the ruins and use that as a historical reference to build projects. But what we finally were really moved by was the landscape. And it obviously existed before the architecture did. And we then started looking at how maybe this idea of landscape can inform not just the fact that the building is accessible as a roof, but also the fact that the form of the building itself is, in some sense, a manifestation of the fluid formations of the landscape around the river. So that's really the context of the project.
And I understand that you struggled with how to start this project and you developed almost fully another scheme before you developed the scheme that was actually built, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually, while iterative possibilities for a project are obviously a part of our designing process, but we actually went way beyond in developing schemes that were extremely inspired by the architecture of those ruins. So what in those schemes, you actually see almost a progression of the ruin as it were to be evolving over time and manifesting itself today. So it was an interesting scheme as well, but it was very, how should I say, it was very overpowered by the buildings that existed from that medieval time. The switch to the landscape, to the landscape becoming the center of the project was something that evolved from our constant need to situate the project on our site. And the fact that while the site itself was completely barren and featureless, like I said, we needed a catalyst to produce a kind of pulse of developing that site. And for us, catalysts seemed to be landscape.
And could you talk a bit more about the building and various programs?
So the Hampi Art Labs is, in my opinion, a visionary project heralded by the GSW Foundation and Secretary General. They basically want to create an artist residency that is one of the best in the world, for which they commissioned the project. The project itself has workshops, stone, film, metal, woodworking, printmaking, and other kinds of workshops as well as studios for the artists to work in, and residential facilities for the artists as well. So this facility already, I think, is one of the largest in India for sure. And over time, I'm assuming it will also extend and develop further to create a residency that is comparable to anything anywhere in the world. It also recognizes the fact that the Hampi Art Lab is situated to India's largest steel production facility. So the entire production of steel and its machinery and all of its infrastructure is also available to all the artists who come here. So they can actually look at doing pieces that are also inspired by the metal and the furnaces and so on and so forth. So you can do some serious large-scale work here.
Okay. And I wonder if you wanted to expand the regional brief, and did you try to challenge it, or was it executed the way you were asked?
So, one of the challenges of building in Vijayanagar is the fact that we're not necessarily working with the best available skill construction wise. So, what was constantly happening in the project was while we were designing something, there was also a simultaneous feedback loop as a part of the construction process where we were also modifying our design to make things easier to build. So it's a constant back and forth, a kind of recursive format of engagement with the building team as well as material ecology to create a project that is not exactly what we designed, but it was it's a result of our reactions to the available resources, both human and material.
But as far as the program, did you try to expand the program and challenge it in any ways?
So I think what was interesting for us when it came to the program was to try and see if we can look to not just create a facility where there were works that were being produced within the workshops, but also the entire facility becomes a space for basing large artwork. So we were actually imagining this to be a program to also allow for land art to exist. There is no such facility in the country. So while we have indoor galleries, we were also constantly talking about how the entire site that we are kind of building, the undulating landscape, the undulating roof, all of that becomes a canvas for the artists to build large artworks with. And that's really the expansion that we had in mind when we worked on this. That the fact that the gallery is not the space to show the art, not just the space to show art. It's the entire site. So yeah, land art, I think that was really where we were going at.
And I understand that some of the ideas for this building came from your library project. But if you look back now, what would you say the main lessons that you would take from this project? What did you learn?
I think one of the main, let's say, ideas for the project was how do you build a project as complex formally as this project is? How do you build that through means that are frugal and are simple and elementary? So the idea of using compacted mud as shuttering for the entire building was one such idea. And we were really surprised by the fact that the contractor, once we had kind of ideated on how this entire thing was to be done, how efficiently or how intelligently he was able to work out the construction process going forward without a loss of quality, even though he had never done anything like this before. So I think that part of that process was really fulfilling.
You said everything needs to be tested. One of my most important design strategy is to doubt everything. If you could touch on, how you test different ideas and decide on what is right for a specific project or for a specific place.
When we go into a project, we are always going into a project, not saying that we know how to do this, but really that we will figure out how it is to be done as we move forward. And for that, one really needs to work through an open system in some way where you're always able to take in feedback, whether it is feedback that's coming in from the client, whether it's feedback coming in from a material supplier, whether it's feedback that's coming in from a set of contractors, and also the eventual users.
You already touched on the fact that you work with soil, compacted soil. So I imagine that you had to do a lot of testing on how to work with that. And did that inform the way the project was developed? And did it make any significant, contributions, those tests to the original design?
Absolutely. So actually, there are also material, let's say, articulations that seem to become apparent only if you've seen the process. So for instance, all the walls that we've built in the project were actually built with mud brick that is mixed with the slag that comes out of the steel factory. So you're really using a waste material with the local soil to create building blocks. So while I think there is this constant understanding of sustainability as being something that's special in a particular project, but I think we need to start already talking about sustainability as a feature that is built into everything. I mean, we should not even talk about it as an exception. It should be understood that that needs to be a way of thinking for everything that you do in a project. And likewise, we were using, like I said, evolving and producing these slag blocks that we used for the construction of the walls, as well as, for instance, even the simple act of using the soil as shuttering. So you end up not wasting money or resource on creating formwork for the building. Of course, there can be an argument about how it's not perfect. You might not get the exact size down to a millimeter, but I also feel that the idea of perfection is something that is also specific to context, and the fact that we can produce a project like this with the limited means that we have access to has far greater value than this quest of the perfect corner.
Would you talk about some of the hybrid qualities of the project?
I mean, the hybridity of form is quite straightforward, as in it's a kind of building that is simultaneously landscape. It's a roof, but it's also a garden. It's a space, programmatically, it is a space for industrial production through the workshops, but it's also a space of creative thinking and repose because of the artists' studios. It's a space to show art as through the gallery and through the site itself. And it's also a residential campus which has artists who live there. So there is a kind of hybridity of both of form and of program. The materiality itself is a combination of using, like I said, slag building blocks, earth as a means to create formwork for the project, as well as the concrete and steel that is produced in the factory, right? Literally a kilometer or less than a kilometer away from our site. So it's really one can take a position saying that, you're building in concrete, but the fact is that the cement and the steel is available to us literally 500 meters away from where we sit. And not to use that in itself would be, in some sense, a disservice to that context as well. So yes, there is a hybridity of program, there's a hybridity of form, there's a hybridity of material that this entire thing acts to.
When you talk about your work, you use such words and phrases as fluid, seamless, the weight of history, learning from the past, the landscape within the building, and a dialogue with the sky. So how else would you describe your work, and what kind of architecture do you try to achieve?
Yeah, so I think the idea, I mean, I really like, there are a couple of moments within the project where the conversation between the ground, the planting, the landscape of the ground, the landscape of the roof, the building itself, and the sky sit in such incredible contrast that it's almost magical at points. And I think that experience ties in very closely with the experience of the ruins of Hampi as well. And it's really from this this completely different position, formal position that the Hampi Art Labs is, with the ruins that actually sit close to our site. That despite this real contradistinction between these two schemes, there seems to be a conversation that is of parity. That the experiences from one seem to move into the other, despite the formal polarities that these two projects occupy. And to to see that experience finally in the build project was really rewarding.
If you go beyond Hanpi Art Lab, what would you say are some of the qualities that you try to achieve in your architecture beyond that?
I think one of the things that I'm very interested in is this idea of weight. It also comes from my experience of, when I was very young, many years ago in LA, I first saw an entire retrospective of Richard Serra's stock ellipses, and I was absolutely blown away by the emotive quality of the space that those beautiful objects produced. And the way that they enveloped you completely. And yet the fact was that while there was this beautiful sense of movement in those spaces, there was also a sense of weight. And this contradiction about weight and movement, it seemed very counter-intuitive, but that's something that's really interesting for me, to be able to work with contradiction.
And finally, I have another one of your quotes that I would like you to elaborate on. So you said, I want to avoid situations where one becomes too comfortable or familiar with a particular technique or working with particular material. I think familiarity leads to a sense of comfort I want to avoid. If you could elaborate that.
Yeah, I think I think that's I've been a little too honest when I've said that, but the thing is also I think we kind of tend to very often get lulled into a space that we inhabit that is comfortable, which is great because it allows you a moment of rest. But I think what it doesn't let you do then is to look for something beyond your kind of realm of comfort. And when I'm actually looking at projects, and they sometimes, when we are drawing these projects, building models of these projects, they seem to work themselves out really very simply or very quickly. I'm always very uncomfortable with that, because I just feel that I've not spent enough time trying to think about all of the potential possibilities that the project has. And to find those potential possibilities, it also means that I have to move out of my own, let's say, blinkered view of a particular project, and to look at the project from a different point of view. To be able to do that, one also then has to figure out how to ask the right questions. And I think for me, that is extremely important, to be able to ask yourself questions that make you think about another way to look at the same project and to look at your own point of view. So it's in some sort of self-critique as well, to be able to find answers that would then take us to the next set of questions that would further inform both our thinking as well as our work that we were going to produce. And I think that's the conversations, the questions, they all, and the research, and of course the academic my academic involvement is all a means to actually produce these multiple points of views, to constantly be looking rather than finding. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Sameep. Very good. Thank you so much.